You're listening to the School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast with me, Maury Morgan.
Ladies and gentlemen, your next comedian.
Shouldn't drink on an empty head, you know that, don't you?
That is the shittiest heckle I have ever heard in my life.
Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
What's a bucket list?
You have dangerously underprepared yourself for the shit that is about to get real.
If you haven't heard of comedian Simon Taylor before, then you soon will. 7 years into the comedy game, Simon has already made his mark in Australia and the USA, writing for Sean McAuliffe and Jay Leno, and building a solid stand-up comedy reputation in the meantime. In this School of Hard Knock Knocks podcast, you'll learn how Twitter can improve your joke structure, and how luck can be improved through preparation, at least according to Simon's dad. Simon is generous with his insights and provides excellent advice to any new stand-up comedian looking to further their career. And he gives this advice from the other side of the world, in New York, while looking at a squirrel. You'll enjoy this interview. Oh, and one last thing. If you're in Melbourne from June 18 to 22 and want to improve your stand-up comedy skills, book your seat in the full stand-up comedy course held from Sunday to Thursday, 6:30pm to 9:30pm at Imperial in South Yarra. Spaces are limited. Now, here's Simon. Good morning, Simon. How are you?
Hey, Maury. Good to be on.
You are in New York, Simon, I believe.
I am. I'm looking out at the trees from my apartment window, and I'm very grateful I have trees because I think a lot of apartments here, you got traffic lights or ambulances going by. So I've got a good spot. I'm just sitting being grateful right now.
So are you looking at trees? Are you on the second, third floor, or are you looking down on trees?
I'm looking at trees on the second floor. So I've got a squirrel opposite me right now. So how novel.
Welcome to America. Well, that's fantastic. Well, you are doing something that a lot of comedians would love to do, and that is move to New York and do stand-up comedy. How long have you been in New York?
A week. 1 week.
It's not your first trip to New York, though. I assume you've been there a few times.
I was here last year a couple of times. I lived in Los Angeles last year.
Right.
But because I was writing for some shows. But I came up to Boston and then down to New York. And just spent a few weeks on and off. I don't think I spent any more than 3 weeks in one place last year. So I kind of did a lot of places last year, and I think New York was I could just tell it was my sort of city, I think.
Yeah, you're in New York, but let's cut back. Let's go back to the beginning. Simon, when did you start comedy? When did you get into it?
Well, I actually just looked this up the other day to try work it out. I went through my calendar, and my first gig as stand-up was nearly 7 years ago. I think it's June 8th was my first gig. It was at the Comics Lounge in Melbourne. Yep. And so 7 years I've been doing it.
And what made you have a crack at stand-up?
Well, I talk about this in my shows. I pretty much always wanted to do it. So apparently when I was 5 years old, I used to dress up as a clown. When I was 8 years old on school camp, I entered a talent competition doing stand-up. And then when obviously I went to school, I was kind of high school, I was institutionalized and told I had to go to uni and things like that. And I had an interest in psychology. So I studied psychology at uni. And all throughout that, it was actually really interesting. I had to be trying to find ways to be creative and artistic and doing, writing music and doing poetry competitions. And I took up magic because magic you can kind of practice in the bedroom. Yep. But it all kind of came back to stand up in a way that it just allowed me to be pure on stage. I didn't have to do improv. I didn't require a troupe. I didn't need props to do magic. It was just what I wanted to do originally was just be on stage and make people laugh. So it was once it happened, it made me think, oh, of course, this is what I always wanted to do. Right. So it was. I feel like it was there from a young age, and I just took a massive detour to get back to it.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad, because the people who are listening to this would be quite annoyed if you just went, yep, that's it, and a straight line, and now you know exactly where you want to be.
Yeah, no straight lines.
Well, that's good. Now, you're a writer. You just mentioned that you had been writing in Los Angeles, and you've got some pretty big names in your resume in terms of people you've written for. In Australia, Sean McAuliffe, and then, of course, the famous Jay Leno in the US. Did the writing start before the stand-up comedy, or what's the timeline?
Yeah, I guess the writing predates it because I wrote different things. So I think when I was like 18, I was writing poetry and music and songs, and then I think when I was doing I did spoken word and in improv. I guess I did a lot of improv when I was sort of maybe 20-ish. And then Twitter, I think Twitter was kind of the biggest thing. Twitter was, I think, maybe when I was 21 or 22. It would have been earlier than that. But that was just learning to write short, sharp jokes and just reducing the amount of words you need. So Twitter, I put Twitter down to where I really learned to write a joke, because when I got the Jay Leno opportunity and they asked me to send jokes in, I'd been writing hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of jokes on Twitter all up. And that's where my skill came from. So I fully credit Twitter for being my training ground to joke writing.
Oh, there you go. So anyone who grew up on Instagram, they're pretty screwed then.
Well, yeah, I think there's I'm trying to get the right term here. Disease is a strong term, but there's a disease of memes are actually... I think they're not helpful in the creative process, because there seems to be these trends of a particular joke structure. You post a photo of like a dog eating pizza, and then it says, everyone just writes, "Oh, when you get home on a Friday night." It all starts with "when you" and a photo of something irrelevant. Yep. And so that's kind of sweeping the meme world right now on Instagram. So you need some framework, but you also need Twitter was just like a blank space, and you had to do it in 140 characters. Where I feel like Instagram, to get attention, that the photo needs to be, particularly eye-catching, and YouTube's the same. There's a lot of yelling happening on YouTube. Yep. There's a lot of pranksters yelling at things or running around. There's a lot of like high arousal. I think that's the difference. I think Instagram, there's a level of arousal you need. So it's either a super attractive person, amazing sunset, animals, or cute puppies, that type of thing. That requires a high arousal to get people's attention. But with Twitter, when it was just all text, you had to read the text, and the text had to be good quality. And now Twitter's kind of been ruined a little bit by the high arousal. They've got GIFs and memes and things like that. So it's not necessarily the best quality of writing that gets noticed. It's the thing that grabs your attention, which is just sort of high arousal. So the mediums, I think Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now Twitter, because they've introduced memes and GIFs, has kind of been ruined by pursuit of arousal as opposed to quality content.
Yeah, right. You alluded to it just before about constraint. There's that expression, constraint is the mother of invention, not necessity. Right. So 143 characters is a good example of constraint. Did that turn funny jokes into hilarious jokes, or good jokes into great jokes?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it required you to use the minimum amount of words possible to make the joke land. And when you do that, there's I think there's a certain skill that is built, and that skill is helpful, because if you know what the minimum is for a joke to land, then that gives you a lot of control over what you do with the free space, whether it's more jokes or whether it's playing with the form. And on stage, some people just use the minimum amount of words to get to the joke, where others put their personality in and talk a little bit longer, and they can get away with it. I know Greg Fleet is someone I really like watching, because he can take 2.5 minutes to get to his first punchline, but it's really enjoyable. Like, it's a really enjoyable 2.5 minutes. So the joke is, just comes at the 3-minute mark, but it's but he has the ability to write the basic skeleton of the joke, and then what he does from there is play with it. So I think Twitter gave me that. I think that it gave you the necessity to just do the minimum to land the joke, and then from there you can do what you like.
Yeah, right. So how did then you go from Twitter to Jay Leno or Sean McAuliffe? I'm not sure who came first, Sean or Jay.
Yeah, Jay came first. It was really just I had been doing stand-up for a little while, not too long, maybe a year or two. I think probably 2 years. So I'd been doing stand-up for 2 years, and a friend of mine lived in LA and just said, "I'll come over and help me write some music." And so he just knew me as I think he knew me as a magician, actually. And in my magic, I had done, I'd hung out with other magicians and suggested jokes for them and things like that. So when you just belong to a community, you throw ideas at each other. And this...
what is the collective for magicians? A poof. not the poof I was imagining in my head. It was kind of a pink powder smoke poof.
Well, I mean, there's an argument for both definitions, but the magic community is quite an interesting. I recommend people watch a documentary called "Magicians: Living Life in the Unknown" or something like that. I can't remember the exact title, but there's a recent documentary out that's pretty good description of.
I'm a big fan of Derren Brown, so psychology and magic.
I just saw him here 2 days ago. Actually, he has a show in New York right now. But anyway, so how did I get to
Jay Leno?
Yes, so I'm just trying to find the best place to kick this off. So a friend invited me to LA to help him write something. And when I went, I had one stand-up gig booked. And when I did my set, I did maybe an 8-minute set at a comedy night. A producer from The Tonight Show saw my set and said, "Oh, well, you're funny. Come and watch the show." And I thought, "Oh, sweet, free tickets to Jay Leno." And I get there and I love the show. And as I'm leaving, the producer said, "Oh, well, come backstage and meet Jay." And when I met Jay, I kind of just, made, chit chat with him. And and he said, "Oh, okay, well, Chris says you're funny. Send some jokes in." So I went home that night, wrote 2 pages of topical jokes, and the next day I had a contract. So it was kind of, I don't know. To me, it was luck. To me, it was like a very lucky situation. But reflecting on it, if I hadn't been prepared, like if I hadn't been doing stand-up all that time, the producer wouldn't have, invited me. And if I hadn't been writing all those Twitter jokes, those topical Twitter jokes, then I wouldn't have been able to do those 2 pages that night. So I think it's kind of my dad says luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Right. And so I was prepared for it. So, and that's kind of the philosophy I have now, because it can be frustrating for comedians when they feel like they're doing lots of preparation and no opportunities come up. But you can only really control the preparation. So if you put all your energy into the preparation, and the opportunities will come. And sometimes you've got to try manufacture some opportunities or encourage opportunities, but they're useless without the preparation. And I've heard stories of people meeting their idols or having job opportunities or getting offers, and they just weren't prepared. So be prepared is step number 1, and then step number 2 is find or, fall upon opportunities.
So your accent, you're from Melbourne, so your accent's a little flatter than those stereotyped in Hollywood movies. When you went to LA, you met Jay Leno. Did people even figure out that you're an Aussie, or do you put it more on?
I would describe this as the broad Australian accent, because I think most people who are famous in Hollywood now who are Australian, like Hugh Jackman and Nicole Kidman, have this kind of accent, sort of the middle of the road accent. So it's never a factor, to be honest.
And what about the comedy? Because I certainly watched quite a lot of your comedy online, and you do a lot of comedy about the Australian lingo, about words. How does that joke material play in other markets? In this case, the US.
It doesn't change, just the references. So if you've got a Neighbours reference in your stand-up, it probably won't work in America because they don't watch it, but in the UK it would. So the content doesn't really change unless it's a cultural specific reference. Everything else is pretty much the same.
Yep. Okay, got you. Going back into your comedy movement, you were based in Melbourne, and where was your first international gig? Was it in LA for that 7-minute set?
No, I'd done Singapore and Indonesia, I think, before that.
Right.
Yeah, I think Southeast Asia. I like Southeast Asia, and there are some good circuits there. So I'd done kind of transitioned from magic to stand up in an interesting way. Because I was doing, I had like a 45-minute magic set, and then when I started stand up, I had 5 minutes of stand up, and what I would kind of do was open for myself with stand up. I'd start 5 minutes of stand up and then go 40 minutes of magic, and then it was 10 minutes to stand up, and then 30 minutes of magic, and then so I kind of created a transition from from magic to stand up just in my own gigs that I booked as a magician. So there was a time where I think I was doing Indonesia and Singapore, and it was it was kind of 50-50 stand up and magic at the time. So today it's pretty much. It's pretty much 100% stand up. Every now and again, maybe in like a festival show, I'll put like a tongue-in-cheek magic trick, but not a serious magic trick. I like taking the piss of magic now as opposed to doing it earnestly.
Back in Melbourne here, you have, I believe it's about 7 years that you've been playing at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. Mm-hmm. This year, your show is called Spectacular-ish. I'm assuming that had a little bit of magic theme to it, the spectacular?
Not really. There was like one little like joke about me being kind of like a Vegas magician in my masculinity, like a bit confused.
Okay.
So it was like, I'm a man, but I do shimmies and I throw confetti. Like that's, that was just the gag. But no, it was a stand-up show.
Okay. So this was the 7th year that you've done the Melbourne International Comedy Festival.
Uh-huh.
How had your material matured over those 7 years?
It's hard to say, actually. Part of me thinks I've been doing the same sort of stuff for 7 years, but I don't know. I feel like I have a little. You know what it is? I think the social commentary is a little more evident. So I think I'm more confident to share my opinion as where I think I used to be more observational and then personal. Now I can kind of share my opinion a bit more. So I have confidence in my comedy enough to be able to be a little more opinionated.
Right. Are you going to get as opinionated as say George Carlin? Or?
It's hard to know. I think the audience will decide that. If I'm try more opinionated stuff and the audience goes with it, then I'll keep going with it. But if they reject that, I mean, it's Woody Allen used to say it's that he didn't choose his kind of neurotic, nervous persona, geeky persona. The audience did, because he says he's more of a jock. He likes drinking beer and watching sport, but that if he doesn't do that on stage, is because it's not what makes people laugh. So to some degree, you let an audience sort of decide what they think is funny about you. And that's how I kind of do it. I just get on stage and just throw things at the wall, and whatever sticks is what I continue to do.
Yeah, right. And when it comes to writing material, you're saying that the material may be influenced by the character that's forming over these years. How do you go about it? That the day after you met Jay Leno, for example, you said you went back to your room and just wrote pages and pages. Yeah, do you have any methodology for writing new material?
No, it always changes. I think the way I write stand-up is I just come up with ideas and just get on stage and do them. So I don't think writing a script for stand-up is the most effective way for me. I just dot point, I want to talk about pizza, and then I want to talk about skydiving, and then I want to talk about whatever. So I have 3 dot points in my head, and I get on stage and I just kind of talk it out and try the ideas on stage, and whatever gets laughs I keep, and whatever doesn't I throw away, and you kind of just kind of do it that way. So yeah, you just build your hour through lots of stage time. I think that's, in my opinion, that's the best way to build stand-up. In terms of like TV writing and things like that, if I'm writing for Jay Leno or for Sean McAuliffe, you have all your headlines and you write, a few different punchlines to the setup and you send it their way. So to see what they like best. So TV writing and stand-up writing are different, I think.
Oh, that makes sense. If something doesn't work, I've heard a rule that says try it 3 times, 3 different audiences, and only after the 3rd time it doesn't work, then throw it away.
I think all those rules are bullshit. I think I don't think you should be so systematic. I think just get on stage and do the shows. And there's heaps of examples of things that didn't work 10 times and then all of a sudden they work. And there are things that you kind of stick with just because it shows your personality and it gets people to know who you are a bit more. And then that helps with later jokes, even though that one doesn't work as much. And like I think trying to deconstruct and to sort of teach rules and rules of thumb is unhelpful in this creative situation, because for every rule you have, there's too many exceptions for it to be helpful. So my advice for anyone wanting to do comedy is just do it. Just get on stage and do a bunch of stuff and see what works. And so trial by fire is my personal opinion.
Yeah, it seems to be a very common answer to that. Trial by fire. It's you wouldn't want to go about the same way getting a pilot's license, but for some reason stand-up comedy, you get out there and you make the mistakes in front of up to hundreds of people and battle on.
Well, you don't have to make the mistakes in front of them to begin with. I mean, the open mics are, just small and usually quite safe. So, you're only doing it in tiny little rooms and sometimes other comics. And that vulnerability, I think, is something that you never actually lose in stand-up. Yep. You could be doing it for 20 years and you still have to be vulnerable when you try something new or, go on a riff or a tangent. So go be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. That's all. Okay. Trying to over-prepare is, could be detrimental.
Yeah, right. So a lot of comedians, they're going to get to a point in their career where, whether they're semi-pro or completely professional, that they get an agent. When do you know is the right time? Does it just happen naturally, or does someone tap you on the shoulder and go, here's a contract?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it's, as I said, the preparation and opportunity philosophy is just, be prepared, just be good at the craft. Like, be good at the craft and focus on what you can control. And the opportunity of an agent, well, if you're doing lots of shows, eventually someone will see you and you'll get that sort of attention. It's going to be case by case. Whether you're ready for one or not depends on what you want to do with your life. So there's no rule on it. I think just focus on being good at stand-up. That's step number one. And then if you want to do it, full time or trying to make a living out of it, then that's when you try to chase those opportunities mm-hmm. and hit people up and so on and so forth. But who's to determine what level you are at creatively? Like, it's someone could be ready in 2 years, someone maybe won't be ready in 10 years. There's really, an agent is just someone who thinks they can make money off you. That's really all it is. There's no creative merit to it. So if you're a YouTube sensation but you suck at stand-up, you can still get an agent to help you make money off your audience. So creative ability and pursuing an agent, I think, can be distinct.
Very good advice. Now, Simon, if you do have an agent, and if someone wants to get in contact with you, if someone wants to whether they're in New York, LA, Melbourne, Sydney, anywhere in the world, Simon Taylor, how does someone get in contact with the comedian Simon Taylor?
There are a million ways. You know, there's my website, mrsimontaylor.com. There's my Twitter, my Facebook, my Instagram. You could contact A-List, which are my agents, on their website. Like, I make it pretty easy to to get onto me. So, I think a Google will have some contact details of me within about 10 seconds if you try.
Well, you're a very approachable man. If you are in New York and you're listening to this, is there somewhere we can see you this coming week or next couple of weeks?
Yeah, 23rd of May, I'm on in East Village at a venue called Three of Cups. So all the details are on my website for that.
Right. Well, Simon, thank you very much for sharing so much of your time and also some insights into stand-up comedy. You've got a very interesting and unique story. Obviously, we've not had anyone talk about coming from a magician background at all. And it's fantastic that you've made that leap. What appears to me to be a very rapid rise, as you say, 7 years Melbourne International Comedy Festival. You've certainly done some great stuff. We'll be following you throughout. So thanks again, Simon, for your time.
All right. Thanks, Murray.
Cheers. Thanks.
Bye.